All right, let's jump right into one of the biggest, most fundamental questions in all of political theory. What is the state actually for? I mean, is it here to protect us, to be our guardian, or is it something else entirely? And that is the core conflict we're digging into. You've got these two completely opposite ideas. In one corner, the state is just a neutral referee, right? It's just there to make sure everyone plays by the rules and to keep the game fair. But in the other corner, the state is seen as a star player on one of the teams, actively working to make sure that team always wins. It's a massive clash of ideas, and it pretty much frames every political debate happening today.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the neoliberal vision of a tiny, minimal state. Then, we're going to dive headfirst into the Marxist critique, which sees things, well, very differently. After that, we'll put them in the ring together for a head-to-head showdown. And finally, we'll see how these classic theories are still changing and sparking new debates. Sound good? Let's get to it.
Okay, first up, neoliberalism. Now, if there's one thing you need to know about this school of thought, it's that it is deeply skeptical of state power. For neoliberals, the government isn't this great force for good. At its absolute best, it's a necessary evil.
You know, this idea really took off in the middle of the 20th century, mostly as a pushback against the big welfare states that were popping up. Neoliberals basically said, whoa, hold on. When the government gets too involved in everything, healthcare, pensions, you name it, it starts to crush individual freedom. Their dream state is what they call a night watchman state. Think about it. A night watchman doesn't run your life. He just protects your property. And that's all they think the government should do. And this right here is the core belief, the central faith of neoliberalism, the magic of the free market. They believe that when you let millions of people make their own choices, buying, selling, innovating, it creates this amazing self-regulating system that's way more efficient and frankly more fair than any government committee could ever dream of being. Government intervention just messes that up.
And this quote from Friedrich von Hayek, one of the godfathers of neoliberal thought, just nails it. He warned that all this government planning wasn't just bad for the economy, it was a one-way street to losing your personal freedom. He saw it as a threat to the natural, spontaneous order of things.
Then you have a guy like Robert Nozick, who took this idea and cranked it up to 11. For him, the state's job was only to be that night watchman. And get this, his view on taxes, he basically argued that taking your money through taxes to pay for social programs is no different than forcing you to work for free. It's a pretty radical stance, right? But it's a powerful argument for an absolutely minimal state.
Okay, so what does this look like in the real world? The economist Milton Friedman laid it out pretty clearly. He said we should get rid of stuff like rent control and minimum wage laws. Why? Because he saw them as artificial barriers gumming up the works of the super-efficient market machine. The idea is to let the market do its thing, free from government meddling.
So, to wrap up this idea, the to-do list for a neoliberal state is super short. You've got law and order, enforcing contracts, protecting property, and national defense. That's it. The government's job is to provide a safe and stable playground and then let individuals go and play freely within it. Anything more than that is just getting in the way.
And now let's do a complete 180. We're moving on to the Marxist critique, which doesn't just disagree with the neoliberals, it takes their whole idea of a neutral state and throws it right out the window. For a Marxist, the state is anything but a neutral referee.
See, Marxists have a totally different origin story for the state. They argue it's not some timeless, natural thing. It was invented for a very specific reason. Look at this timeline. Way back when, in what they call primitive communism, there was no private property, no classes, and guess what? No state. The state only came into being when private property did, which split society into owners and non-owners. Suddenly, the owners needed a way to protect their stuff from the people who didn't have any, and that's when they created the state.
So here's the bottom line from a Marxist perspective. The state is a weapon, an instrument, wielded by the ruling economic class. And it keeps control in two key ways. The first one is obvious, force. The police, the army, the courts. But the second way is much sneakier, ideology. It uses things like schools and the media to make everyone believe that the way things are is just normal and fair. This is what Marxists call false consciousness, when the working class actually buys into the system that's designed to keep them down.
All right, we've got our two heavyweights in their corners. One says the state is a protector, the other says it's a tool of the powerful. So let's bring them to the center of the ring and see how they stack up side by side.
This chart just lays it all out plain and simple. I mean, look at the origin story.
For neoliberals, it's a social contract we all agree to for our own protection. For Marxists, nope, it's an invention to protect the rich. How about its purpose? A simple night watchman versus a tool for class domination. They aren't just disagreeing on the details, they are looking at the exact same thing and seeing two completely different realities. It's wild.
But of course, the conversation didn't just stop there. These aren't ancient, dusty ideas. Political theories are alive. They grow, they adapt, and they get a whole lot more nuanced. So let's look at how these classic views have been updated.
And this is the big question that later thinkers, even ones inspired by Marx, started to wrestle with. I mean, really, does the state always, in every single case, just do exactly what the most powerful capitalists want? Is it just a puppet on a string? Or could it be more complicated than that? And that question led to this really cool idea called relative autonomy. Neo-Marxists started to argue that, okay, maybe the state isn't just a simple puppet. To keep the whole capitalist system from collapsing, sometimes the state has to go against what individual capitalists want in the short term. Like, maybe it passes some labor laws or creates welfare programs. It does this not to help the workers, but to keep the system stable in the long run. It's got some wiggle room.
And even here, there's a debate. On one side, you have the instrumentalist view from guys like Ralph Miliband. He said, yeah, the state still serves the rich, mainly because the people who run the state, the politicians, the top civil servants, all come from that same elite class. But then you have the structuralist view from Nikos Poulontazas. He argued it doesn't matter who's in charge. He said the structure of the state itself is built to serve capitalism. Think of it this way. It doesn't matter who's driving a car if the car is built to only drive on one road. The structure determines the destination.
So why does any of this old theory matter today? Because these ideas are everywhere. Every single time you hear people arguing about taxes or about whether we should regulate big tech or how much to spend on schools and healthcare, you are hearing the echoes of this fight. Is the state a night watchman that should stay out of it? Or is it a tool of the powerful that needs to be challenged? This debate is the foundation of modern politics.
So in the end, we're left with this powerful choice, this stark contrast. Is the state a neutral referee just trying to keep the game fair for everyone? Or is it a star player, bought and paid for by the most powerful team on the field? Now that you've heard both sides, how do you see the state? What does the world look like to you?